Well, that actually brings us to the first announcement. So if you are an AKA member, or if you were an AKA member, we have our member survey up on the website. So I'm going to post the link in the chat. So if you guys could at some point, please go fill that out, because that is the most important thing that we on the board that we use to make decisions going further. So if you'd like to see electronic jockas, if you'd like to see breeding awards, curriculums, what can we do as a national membership? Our numbers grow smaller every year, and what can we do as our loyal members to make sure you keep renewing your membership, and what can we do to bring in more members going forward? Fill it out on that survey, please, and thank you. I also wanted to talk a little bit about Charlie. As I mentioned, he was involved in a car accident. So we are a little behind on JACA, and we are desperately behind on articles for JACA as well. So as you guys are getting ready to come into summer and tubbing season and all the great things that we do in the spring and summer with our fish, think about maybe documenting them and taking some notes, and writing an article. They don't have to be professional. Scholarly articles, hobby articles work as well. We are also still looking for an affiliate club to host the AKA convention in 2023. So if anybody knows anyone in their local club, or you guys feel like dealing with a bunch of grumpy old farts, please let us know. We do have a nice full schedule this summer for fish events. The first one coming up is Killi Carnival in South Bend. That's April 30th through May 1st. David Heimerlein is collecting fish for that event. So please make sure we support them. Alan and his club is having Saki Southwest Aquarium Keepers event in Phoenix on May 15th. I will be speaking. Yay, I'm so excited. And we're going to be talking about Florida fish and some specific ones that I collect. So if anybody has any suggestions as to what fish go best in aquariums, because Saki's more towards the general hobbyists than killifish people. So if you have any suggestions on what fish you think might be good for a general hobbyist, please type it in the chat or reach out to me. Don't forget, we have the Triple Crown coming up in July. We're really going to want to show a lot of support here, because we're going to have the live bear people, the cichlid people, the rainbow fish people, and the Killi people. So we're going to have a great opportunity to get our fish in front of other equivalent hobbyists who have the knowledge and ability to take care of them. So please donate. Think about the next couple hatches, if you could hold a couple fry for us. And of course, we have Waco on the books as well, November 5th and 6th. I think that is all the announcements I have. Ryan, are you ready?
Yeah. Okay, cool. So my name is Ryan Enright. I serve on the board of governors for the AKA, and I wanted to give a quick little talk about casual killi keeping. I entered into the hobby as just a general fish keeper who got interested in killies, and so this is kind of an important subject to me. So I'm going to kind of go over a couple of things here. So for the new people, why would you want to pick killifish as just a general aquarist hobbyist? To me, they're visually stunning. There's a huge variety of species with lots of different forms, different colorations, and different behaviors. The term killifish encompasses, like 1,000 different fish. So there's lots of different things to pick from. They're a real versatile fish. They do all good in all different kinds of aquarium, and there is definitely enjoyment to be had for every type of hobbyist, from the person just getting into keeping fish to the veteran who's been in it for 40 years and has a biology lab in their garage. So if you are new to killies, I always recommend people to focus on the non-annuals. There's nothing wrong with the annuals, the nothos and stuff like that. They just can be kind of difficult and temperamental, and they're all very tiny. So I always recommend people, let's just focus on the non-annuals when you're getting into it. You could go with the Aphysimians. There's over 100 different species of those. Most of them are pretty small, so they do really good in your nice planted nano tanks. They're plant spawners. They've got big flowy fins, a lot of them do. They're really cool little fish. The other species, group that I like to recommend to new people are going to be the pike-like killies. These are my personal favorite. That includes the Epiplatus, the Aplochilus, and the different Pachypanchax. All these guys are going to be plant spawners. In the Aplochilus group, you get some nice semi-aggressive fish with all their interesting behaviors that go along with that. These fish, this little group of fish is generally going to be in like your middle and top of the tank, which is going to come on, be important here later on in the conversation. And then I also like to recommend the Fundulopanchax. There's 20 species of these guys. Most of them like to hang out on the bottom. They've got really pretty colors, really pretty fins, variety. They've got the little tiny guys and then all the way back up to the big blue Galaris. So there's a nice variety there. And like I said, they like to hang out on the bottom, which will be key. You'll see here in a little while. So when it comes to Killies in a planted and decorated tank, we definitely got some pros I wanted to go over. The first one is everybody enjoys a nice decorated planted tank. Has a nice natural look and feel for your fish. When the fish feel comfortable, they behave in different ways. They're just a lot more easier to enjoy when they're hanging out and swimming through the bushes and the different plants and around the rocks instead of just darting to the corner every time you walk up to the tank. If you have a planted and decorated tank, you can keep more fish because you get all those visual breaks from the plants and stuff, and they can set up little territories. Breeding is definitely still possible with Killies in these types of tanks. It's what's referred to as a permanent setup, and we'll kind of go over that a little bit more. Most important to me is that they're not the barren, boring, bare bottom tanks. Those are cool for breeding and everything, but if you really want to enjoy your fish and look at them and stuff, in my opinion, the best way is going to be with a planted and decorated tank. Allows you to use your creativity and all the fun stuff that goes along with aquascaping. There are definitely some cons to keeping Killies in these types of tanks, though. It's the most inefficient egg collection and fry production you could ever have. There's no way to selectively breed if you've got 4 pairs of fish in a 20-gallon tank. You don't get to choose who's making what, so that's definitely a downfall. The adults eat the eggs in the tank. The fry gets eaten. With some species will be eaten by the adults and then more importantly by other fry in the tank. So that goes into the whole inefficiency, I guess, of raising these fish. And anyone who's ever tried to catch a fish in a planted tank knows how difficult it can be. Half the time you end up having to tear it down to catch the ones that you want. So that's definitely would belong in the con side. All right, so this next slide, we're going to talk about groups of Killies in the permanent setup. If you want to breed Killies in a permanent setup, there's some things you're going to need. You want your tank to be at least 10 gallons. The more space, the better. When you're picking your tank size, try and go with a shorter tank versus a taller tank. If we had a 20 long, that'd be way superior to a 20 tall. If you talk to anybody who collects these fish in the wild or watch videos about it, they don't find them in 3 feet of water. They find them in like a foot of water at the edge of a pond. So the taller tanks don't really do a whole lot for them. Just like anything, they need lids. Lids. Always put lids on your killifish tanks. Always. They'll jump no matter what, no matter how happy they are, or how many floaters and stuff. They tend to jump. For the filtration in my permanent setups, I like to use snails and sponge filters. I've tried with like the hang-on backs and stuff like that, and I think it just creates too much flow. A lot of our fish, like we were saying, they come from the edges of ponds and in little ditches, very slow, still moving water. They don't like a lot of flow. So the sponge filter, they're very efficient and they don't create a lot of flow. And then you keep the snails in there to help keep the detritus eaten up. Excuse me. With the plants and decor, the most important thing that the plants are going to do is they're going to create visual breaks in your tank. The visual breaks allow exhausted females to hide from the males who are always trying to make more baby fish. It allows the sparring males somewhere to go hide from each other after one is defeated, because that's one of the fun things about having these tanks is you'll get to see the males go at it a lot as they form their little territories and kind of chase each other around. But with the visual breaks from the plants and the rocks and the wood and stuff like that, they have places to hide and get away from each other. The plants are going to be what all of our plant spawning fish want to lay their eggs on naturally. So you're going to behave just like you would observe them in the wild. So it's pretty cool. I'm sure we all know by now that planted tanks are healthier tanks. Just in general, they just seem to work out better for everybody. You know, keep the nasty stuff down. It creates a nice little microbiome. So as eggs that are laid in these plants throughout your tank that aren't eaten by the adults start to hatch out, they'll have something to eat right away. You know, little infusoria and little miniature water bugs, things like that, that you can't really see with the naked eye, but your fresh hatched fish will definitely they'll definitely grub on that stuff. As far as the plants go, I like to keep things nice and low tech. So like vowels and swords and hornwort, Java moss, Java ferns, anything that doesn't take a whole lot of nutrients and a whole lot of light. You also like to have plants that are going to go through multiple zones in the tank, you know, not something that just sits on the bottom. You want things to stretch from the bottom to the middle, even all the way up to the top, or from the top down into the middle. With like your floaters, you can use, I personally like water lettuce quite a bit because it's a nice long dangly root that looks really pretty, and you get to watch your fish spawn and lay eggs on the roots up at the top of the water, which is pretty neat behavior to observe. So when we're breeding in the permanent setup, we're going to want 2 tanks. One's going to be for the adults to live in, so that's your nice, beautiful, decorated tank that everybody's looking at. And then you're going to want one to keep on the side for your fry as you remove them as they start to hatch out. Obviously, in the setup tank, we're going to have lots of plants. We really want to pay attention and watch our fish in these types of setups to observe when they're starting to breed. You can take a look at where they're doing it on the top or the bottom. We also want to make sure that they are well fed. I personally feed regular adult size food and baby brine shrimp to all my Killi tanks every day. The baby brine shrimp are good for adults too. They enjoy it, but it's also going to be something small in there. So if you have fry that are hiding that you haven't been able to spot yet, they'll have something to really kickstart their growth and get them going too, before they're big enough to eat the same food that the adults are doing. So we want to feed our fish really well. Live foods are best for egg production, just like they are in the bare bottom tanks and stuff. We're going to watch for the spawning behavior. We want to remove the fry as soon as they're big enough to be seen. So obviously not the fresh hatched one, they're invisible. But once they get a little bit bigger, maybe a 1/4 inch or so, what I like to do is I'll drain the tank down to like maybe 30% to kind of concentrate everybody. And then I'll take a turkey baster out and start sucking the fry out with that, and then put them in that secondary tank that we already have running. That's been the most efficient way for me to get fry from a permanent setup. There is a less efficient way that takes almost zero effort at all. You just feed your fish well and you do nothing. You can eventually end up with multiple generations in the same tank. Obviously, there's going to be predation from the adults and then that first batch of fry. So what I observed when I did this with Gardener Eye the first time is I ended up with maybe a dozen or so fry swimming around in the tank. And then I got none for a month and a half or so. I knew the adults were still spawning and everything. Well, it turns out the biggest predator of fry are other fry. They'll eat the fresh hatched ones, the smaller ones. So until that first generation gets a little bit bigger so that they're not interested in eating little eggs and little fresh hatched fry, you probably won't see any in the tank using this type of method. There's going to be a big gap between the two, but eventually you will get a 3rd generation that starts in there. And I've had Gardener Eye tanks and Australia tanks with 4 generations of fish living in the same exact tank. never removed any of them. So you get a little self-sustaining colony. It's really, really fun to see the different aged fish interacting with each other and swimming around. That's what we're here for, is to enjoy. So it's one of my favorite ways to do it. Plus, it doesn't take a whole lot of effort. So here's the big question that I get all the time is, can I keep killifish in my community tank? And so basically the short answer is yes, we can. The long answer is it's quite complicated, but it's definitely doable. I think it's worth doing too if you've never tried it. This is a picture of my 55-gallon tank I have in my living room, and that's got killies and multiple different kinds of killies in it as well, with a bunch of your other regular run-of-the-mill tropical community tanks. Inhabitants, get angelfish and all kinds of stuff. We're going to go over a list here in a little bit. So if you want to do this, you definitely want to plan. There's some key things we want to consider. Temperature is definitely first on the list. If you have a community tank that runs in the mid 80s, it's probably not going to work the best for a lot of the killifish. There are some that do okay with the high water temperatures. Some of the aplochilus and stuff, they actually like it and will spawn really well with higher temperatures. But you know, like the fish in the picture right there, that's a Shostadide. So the blue galaris, you put him in a super warm tank, he's just going to burn through all his energy, and he's not going to live too long. I keep my community tank at like 76 degrees, which is roughly what the house is most of the time anyway. And I've had pretty good longevity for all the killies that I've kept in it. Another thing to consider is going to be the temperament. So there are some killifish that play nice, and there are ones that don't. And that, again, will come down to individuals as well. So you really want to take a close look at who's in your tank and how they're behaving. Remove aggressive, problematic fish, whether that be the community members or the killies that you're trying to add in. We want to think about the community composition. We've got different layers to the tank: top water, middle water, bottom water. Some fish are going to want territories. Some of them are not going to care. We need to consider what type of feeding we have to do for the community as a whole. We need to consider and plan the aquascape to talk about to create those visual breaks in different territories for fish that need it. And something else to consider is that you'll get zero fry out of a big community tank. None. So feel free to mix whatever fish you want in it. There's no breeding in this tank. Nothing will ever survive. So I keep a variety of different killies in my community tank. So in the community tank, we're going to have the different zones, and different killies like different zones. With a lot of tropical fish, this is a concern, but when you're mixing killifish into a tropical community, it's pretty important to pay attention to this when you're selecting which ones you're going to put in there. If you mix fish that like the wrong zone with the wrong community fish, they're not going to make it. So just be aware of that. For the top zone, I like to go with the Aplochilus panchax or the lineatus. They're pretty aggressive fish. They're big fish. They like to hang out at the top of the water. They got that really neat pineal eye, and so they're always hanging out at the top looking for food. They'll eat anything that will fit in their mouth. So we don't want to mix fish that are small that are going to want to hang out at the top. Think like danios and stuff like that. They're going to eat them. So be really aware of that. There's some native North American killies that do good at the top water too. We got the Fundulus catenatus and the Chrysotis. I've kept both of those in a community tank before, and they do just fine. They like to feed at the top. They like to hang out up there. What we're trying to avoid is too much conflict between the different species at the different level. So for the middle zone, we have to remember that you're going to get fish that come from the top and the bottom that kind of interact in the middle zone. This is where you're going to want to keep like your Aphysinians and stuff. This is where they want to hang out. Think about like your Australes, your striatums, mild-mannered, not too aggressive. In the Fundulus line, we got the Lineoltis and the Singulatus. They seem to like the mid quite a bit. And they do pretty well with other fish too. They're not too aggressive. They like to kind of just keep to themselves and exist. The Gardneri is kind of like, I've always considered the Gardneri, like a mid to bottom level fish. They definitely do the bottom a lot, but they seem to like to hang out in the middle and cruise around looking for food. Any of the Packy Panchaks are going to do, they're going to be a nice mid-level fish. They'll go up to the top sometimes too, but they'll be more than content to hang out in the middle, especially if there's a big semi-aggressive killie like a lineatus or something at the top. They'll be more than happy just to hang out in the middle. In the bottom, you're going to have like your blue galaris. He's going to want to hang out in the bottom pretty much 90% of the time, come up to feed every once in a while. North American native would be the Floridae, so the American flagfish. I don't know if you saw them on my shirt when we first started. They're definitely a bottom guy too. I've kept them with the blue galaris for a long time, and they don't have territorial disputes. You know, my blue galaris grow a nice trident tail in the community tank, even though they're in there with the American flagfish. People say they're pretty nippy. I've only ever had one that was nippy, and I just took him out of the tank and replaced him with something else. So watch your fish, make sure that they're not fighting too much. Do be aware that all the killies are more than capable and willing to come down to the bottom to feed. So you will get some interaction there. So keeping things calm, that's the whole point of having a community tank. It's a nice, calm, peaceful environment for everybody to live in. The keys to that are going to be plants, rocks, wood, and more plants. The plants are the key. Like I was saying earlier, you want to have a nice plant that will go from the bottom to the middle all the way up to the top. You know, your jungle vowels are going to do that. Some of your Java ferns that get bigger can do that. You can get an Amazon sword will have a nice clump at the very bottom and then open up to this beautiful plant in like the mid-level. We don't really want to have line of sight from one end of the tank to the other without any breaks in it. So lots of plants are going to be the big key to this. I like to use rocks and wood to like stack them together and make little caves. You know, it's fun to do, but it also gives little territories and hiding spots for the different fish in your tank. You can see in this picture, that's a Florida flagfish hanging out with a zebra loach. I keep half a dozen of each in my community tank, and they get along just fine, despite the fact that they're both bottom dwelling. They both like to eat on plants and algae wafers and stuff that I put down there. They all seem to get along just fine. They also have their own little notches that they like to hang out in. I don't have any pictures of it right here, but my flagfish like this one particular clump of plants on the right-hand side, and all of my zebra loaches hang out in a cave I built in the middle of the tank. And they all interact with each other at feeding time, obviously, but it is possible for them to coexist. So now that we understand what we need in our community tank, we really have to think about the right tank mates for our killies. Like we talked about before, we don't want anything smaller than their mouth. Killies are relatively aggressive, and big fish eats little fish. So don't put them in with comets and things like that. They'll just gobble them up. I found that keeping them with semi-aggressive fish and peaceful fish is okay. All killies seem to have a little bit of bulldog in them. They're kind of bossy. They like to flare up and flare gills and tail smack each other and stuff. And they will do this to other fish. When you put them in the tank at first, expect some sparring and some establishment of dominance in the tank. As long as it doesn't result in death or like completely shredded fins and stuff, I found it usually goes away after a few days, after they all kind of realize, the killie usually just wants everybody to know not to pick on it. And so give it a few days. If it doesn't calm down, you might have to make some adjustments and try a different one in there. But I found it usually just takes a few days to a week for it to calm down. As far as tank mate suggestions, I found loaches do good. I've got mine with angelfish. I had a bunch of people say, oh, you can't keep flagfish with angelfish. Flagfish will just nip all the fins off the angels. I haven't had that happen. I've had 2 generations of flagfish living in this tank with these angels now too. You use like the ghost knives. I have a black ghost knife in this tank. They get along just fine. Large shrimp are okay. So we're talking like your big old giant vampire shrimp and your bamboo shrimp. Those make good tank mates, but definitely not the neos. The little mini decorative shrimp. They don't work out too well. They end up as food pretty quick. Rainbow fish I found are probably my favorite tank mate for the Killies with the communities. They have similar colorations. They swim with each other all the time. I don't know if the Killies think that they're rainbows or the rainbows think they're Killies. I don't know who's doing what, but they all seem to be buds and they don't fight or anything. So, once again, lots of colors. If you look at the picture to the right, you can see a Patriciae. And I got some glow tetras in the back and some rainbow fish. And that's just how they all kind of hang out. So skirted tetras work. I have the glow tetras in my community tank just because we like the colors and stuff. I haven't tried it with some of the smaller, more aggressive tetras, but these guys seem to be a good size and they don't fight at all. I've done them with small eels. We don't want to put them in with a 2-foot long fire eel. They'll probably get eaten, but the smaller ones, when you first start them out, do just fine. I've actually got an African rope fish that lives in my community tank too, and I haven't lost a single fish yet. I think a big part of that has to do with the fact that I keep the tank well fed. So well-fed tanks are happy tanks and they're peaceful tanks. We have different fish in different zones. So just like your regular community stuff, we need to make sure everybody's getting the food that they need in sufficient quantities. You have to make sure it makes it all the way down to the bottom, and then recognize their diets. Like the Florida flagfish, yeah, it'll eat bloodworms and blackworms and that kind of stuff. It likes that just fine, but it really likes to eat algae and algae wafers and vegetable matter like that too. So sinking algae wafers are a good way to get food to the very bottom. My blue Galaris likes to eat algae wafers too. And so for some of these fish that like to hang out on the bottom, sometimes they're not as aggressive as they would need to be to feed on like floating foods and stuff like that. So we really want to make sure that they're getting fed. Fed fish are happy fish, and happy fish don't fight with each other. Once again, just like regular keeping, fish keeping, you do prepared foods, frozen foods, live foods, whatever you want. Over here on the right's a picture of my one of my angels and a gardener eye and a flagfish all hanging out in the same corner of the tank. So we're pretty much towards the end of this little discussion here. It's just a little quote from an article I wrote, and I said, fish keeping is your hobby. I know with Killies, we tend to get obsessed with Latin names and egg productions and collection codes and stuff like that. But it's okay to just keep them like you would any other community fish as well. They're just a pretty fish to look at. This is our hobby. Do what makes you happy when it comes to keeping your fish. Aquascape your tanks, do whatever you want, experiment, have fun. And if you want to get hardcore and sciencey, you can do that too. If you want to just do the ultra passive method, like I said, if we get new fish, we get new fish. That's okay too. So the point is just to have fun, and there are ways to do what it is that you want to do with your hobby. So feel free to reach out to me if you want some more specific tips about community killifish keeping.
All right, guys. Well, thank you all for coming. Next month, Steve Elric is going to give a presentation. He went to Cameroon with Peter DeSozo and that crew. So he is going to show us some pictures and talk about what he found and what he was able to bring home and what survived. So I think that'll be a really good presentation. We're still looking for a presentation in May as well as June. And then of course, July we'll have the convention. So what we'll probably do is, instead of doing like a normal Zoom meeting, we're just going to really blow the Facebook up and make sure we have lots of Facebook Live and show everybody what's going on. So that'll be real fun.